This is the Atlanta Beltline. It's a walking and cycling trail encircling the whole city of Atlanta. It's like our, waterfront, seawall, Venice Beach. You get the point. It's extremely popular, and for good reason.
Which presents a problem. With so much density cropping up around the Beltline, it's getting more and more difficult to traverse the thing. Which means we need more Beltline, more lanes, elevated lanes, on and off ramps. I'm kidding. There's a better solution. This is a train. It moves people. It could even move people on the Beltline. Luckily, the Beltline has always been a light rail plan.
If we take a walk on the Beltline, we can literally see where that train's supposed to go. See all that green space? Yeah, that's for the train. But it's 2023 and we're still asking, where's the train? But first, some context. Public transit in Atlanta is controversial, to say the least. But if you're not familiar with Atlanta, you might not know that we have a full, heavy rail subway system. Despite Atlanta's sprawl, and the comments some people might make, Atlanta can actually be pretty great to get around by public transit. Sometimes.
Back in the 60s and 70s, the federal government funded the creation of subway systems in several cities: Washington, D.C., the Bay Area, and Seattle. Seattle rejected the funding by an extremely narrow margin, and that funding went to us. So now we have 4 rapid transit train lines that actually run quite frequent on weekdays.
But let's not forget the streetcar. Running since 2014, the 2.3-mile loop circles around downtown, hitting all the tourist spots.
Unfortunately, the Atlanta streetcar is cited mostly as a colossal failure. The project didn't connect anything meaningful to locals. People use transit to get things done. It's important for connecting destinations with residents, and the downtown streetcar didn't really do much significant connecting for locals at all.
Now, this is where the present-day project comes in. The East Side Beltline extension plans to extend this downtown streetcar loop onto the East Side Beltline, as you can see behind me.
The problem? The Beltline has actually gotten too busy. It's become a vital connector through many parts of the city. But luckily, the Beltline has always been a transit project at its heart. Ryan Gravel outlined the plan decades ago and designed it as a sustainability and equity project, with a vision of rapid transit and transit-oriented development circling the city, all the way back in 1999.
But really, the East Side extension is just a small part of a much broader plan. It's the foot in the door for new rail in the city.
Most of Atlanta isn't very dense. It's hard to argue that high-capacity transit is effective in large swaths of the city. Places like this just cannot support more than a local bus and ridership. But the East Side Beltline now is different. It's become an intensely dense area, with Old Fourth Ward around Pond City Market becoming its own urban center in its own right. Zooming out and looking at the broader rapid transit plan the Atlanta Planning Commission has developed over the past few decades, we can see that the East Side extension is just a first step into forming a true transit network of light rail. The city hopes to bring rail to all parts of the Beltline, connecting into the downtown loop and forming a true network of frequent, convenient transit between the Beltline and MARTA rail.
The East Side extension is promised to be completed by 2028, extending the downtown streetcar loop up the East Side Beltline to here, Pond City Market. Despite the Atlanta streetcar's negative connotation, this project will transform the transit line and extend it onto one of the most well-suited corridors for public transit in the region.
You might ask, why this extension and why now? I think it's important to ask ourselves what makes this project different from the rest. Why extend the failed streetcar? Looking at population density by census tract on the East Side Beltline, we can see the area is now averaging densities of over 10,000 residents per square mile, the ballpark figure for density that can support rapid transit. And in the context of Atlanta, per MARTA's 2014 ridership projections, the project will see an average of 2,140 daily boardings per mile. This is one of the best bang-for-buck transit projects Atlanta could build right now.
Proponents against the project argue that rail is outdated. E-bikes, e-scooters, and other micromobility options make it easy to get around the trail. Despite the increasing density, they argue that there is still no need for transit here.
But this is a pretty elitist argument to make. Not everyone can ride a bike, or afford a Lime scooter, and nor should they. The Beltline is an equity project after all, and transit makes the project more accessible to all types of users, such as wheelchair users, elderly, and lower-income people. Another comment often made is that the rail would ruin the vibe of the Beltline, but I don't think people realize what the project will actually look like. Much of the right-of-way will use grassy tram lines, which are beautiful in their own right. Look at this shot from Amsterdam, courtesy of Not Just Bikes. Notice how well the people and the tram coexist? 20 years ago, this was just an abandoned train line, and no one was walking here. Cities are constantly changing, and if we don't build the rail, what kind of message does this convey about the goals of our city?
Unfortunately, the problem with building the trail first and the rail second is that now, after the effects of speculation, gentrification, and displacement have occurred on such a massive scale, the people that have moved into this area are actually becoming anti-transit and are fighting the project tooth and nail.
The most recent drama involves a newly formed 501c4 nonprofit called Better Atlanta Transit. Yeah, a good name for an organization fighting a transit project. The most important point I notice is that they think rail will disrupt the public space of the Beltline. They see the trail as their own public park, their own backyard even, with the primary complaints being about the noise or disrupting the park environment. But looking deeper, I don't think that's really what's going on here. Better Atlanta Transit is a dark money 501c4 nonprofit, and per Twitter user Alex Ip, this group is being managed by the lobbyist Billy Linville, who has previously represented Blackstone, Delta, Tesla, and Racetrack. Alongside this lobbyist is Atlanta real estate developer attorney Sharon Gay, former Jamestown executive Walter Brown, and former CEO of the Atlanta Housing Authority, Renee Glover. He says, "You can't make this up," and I frankly agree. It's plain and simple astroturfing, exclusionary corporate interests using scare tactics to get residents against the project. On the other hand, most people support Beltline Rail per the Sapporo report. 12 out of 16 neighborhood units support Beltline Rail, which doesn't even factor in population density, including Midtown, which includes over 19,000 residents. More than 66% of people living within MPUE support Beltline Rail.
Stuff like this, you just can't take seriously. And with outlets like the AJC, Atlanta Journal-Constitution, covering this, it really is a shame how much publicity this idea is getting. But I think it's frankly messed up how wealthy backers can have such an influence on a public project like this.
At an estimated $230 million, the East Side Extension feels like a daunting project to build, but in comparison to highway projects the state is putting forward, it's a relative bargain. For example, the Georgia 400-285 interchange, currently under construction, is valued at $803 million. It's not a monetary issue, it's an issue of political will, and it's up to our leaders to make the right choices for our future generations, and to decide who we're building the city for. That's where I'll leave it for now. Luckily, many of our civic leaders have expressed support for the project against the small opposition. Our mayor, Andre Dickens, has voiced support, as well as Pete Buttigieg and the Atlanta City Council President, Doug Shipman.
If you'd like to write your representatives on the issue, please do. I'll leave various people that are relevant on screen. Personally, I can imagine the future of the rail, and I think it's important that we get back on track and not derail the project. See you next time.